Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight we're going to start out with two people who were very important to the medical world, yet neither one of them was a doctor. The first was Daniel Callahan, who died recently at the age of 88, 2 days before his 89th birthday. Daniel Callahan was a pioneer in the field of medical ethics. He actually was one of the people who started the field of medical ethics as we know it today in the 1960s. He was a philosopher, a Catholic, a sort of a lapsed Catholic. He's the other end of the spectrum to Edmund Pellegrino, whose podcast we've done and I refer you to. Edmund Pellegrino took a sort of a conservative view of medical ethics questions. Daniel Callahan took a decidedly liberal point of view on medical ethics questions. And he's also known for founding the Hastings Center, which is probably the #1 bioethics center in North America today. He founded it in 1969 along with psychiatrist Willard Galen. Over the years, especially in the 1980s, I was on a couple of panels with Daniel Callahan. Very, very intelligent guy. I didn't agree with him on too much. His big issue was that people shouldn't live too long. It was a sort of a duty to die thing. I think 80 was his limit, even though he lived to almost 89. He made a lot of pronouncements about intensive care that I didn't agree with. But as I said, he was well respected in the field. He was a prolific writer, and he was quite impressive when he gave talks. And his major legacy remains the Hastings Center and the Hastings Center Report, which is the journal that comes out. And it's a sort of a liberal think tank. It gets most of the top writers in medical ethics in the United States. Our second non-medical medical personage was Mark Kleiman, who died recently at the age of 68. He was a professor of public policy at NYU. Actually, he only moved to NYU a couple years ago. He was a longtime public policy professor at UCLA, and he made pronouncements on a number of topics, most notably drug legalization. He was in favor of marijuana legalization, but not state by state. He felt it should be within the purview of the federal government and also should be under the auspices of the public health people and not the people who collected the tax revenues who had an incentive to increase marijuana sales. Again, a very smart guy. Didn't always agree with him either, but like Daniel Callahan, he could write well and he could articulate his point very well. Here in a lecture, he talks about another one of his favorite topics, the crime problem in America and the fact that we're building too many prisons. We get a prison industrial complex.
We have an intolerable crime problem in this country and an intolerable incarceration problem. We have 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's prisoners, and we're the richest country in the world. What? Incarceration rate for African Americans right now is 4,000 per 100,000. 4% of all African Americans right now are minorities. But if you break it down by class, let's look at African American men who don't graduate from high school. Each one of them has a better and even chance of doing prison time before he's 30, not jail time, prison time. It's getting harder to single handedly. Not only do I think we can do better, I think we're going to do better. We could, doing nothing we don't already know how to do, and spending less money than we currently spend, have half as much crime and half as many people in prison 10 years from now as we have. And the professionals in the criminal justice system understand how to do that. I think we need a ballot initiative in 2012 that puts a floor under university expenditure and a ceiling on prison expenditure, that allocates some of the prison savings to community corrections, to the courts, to prosecution, to public defense. And that leaves the university and the rest of the criminal justice system against the California Correctional Peace Officers Association. So, what are the extensions of it? Because I think this is the key to less crime, less punishment. Being able to punish people on the outside, not on the inside. Right? The GPS unit can tell you where somebody is within 10 years, all the time. Disney will sell you a packet to go in your kid's backpack. So you can look at it because for $15 a month. And there's a version of the system where you tell the system where the kid's supposed to be at every particular time. And if he's not there, you get a text message. So I claim the combination of GPS position monitoring and drug testing with the HOPE sanctioning system, which is every time you break the rules, something bad happens right now, gets you most of what you want from a prison cell at a tiny fraction of the cost and the suffering.
Mark Kleiman, he was always coming up with novel ideas. We're going to move on and make a brief mention of Lois Wille, who died recently at the age of 87. She was one of Chicago's top journalists. She was a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner, came from Northwestern, and she broke in at the Daily News, and she was sort of a His Girl Friday type. She started out as a reporter, one of the first female reporters to make her mark in Chicago. She made her name with a series on abortion services. This is about 10 years before Roe v. Wade, when the newspapers in Chicago, which was a Catholic town at the time, didn't like to talk about abortion. She won her first Pulitzer Prize for that. Mike Royko said she had no weaknesses as a journalist. Hey, when Mike Royko says that, you got to be pretty good. She ultimately moved on to the editorial page of the Chicago Tribune. She was the mentor to my friend Bruce Dold, who said of her, "People think of this as a two-fisted town, a Rostenkowski steak and gin joint kind of city, but she didn't have to bludgeon anyone. She knew the power of a careful needle." She won her second Pulitzer for her writing on the editorial page. And another one of the city's great reporters had good words to say about her. Rick Cogan, who knows where he speaks, said her voice was distinct, and she thrived having it broadcast through the megaphone of the editorial page. While most editorials were unsigned, people knew who was writing them, no question. I'll just say, forget the Pulitzer Prizes. You get praise like that from Royko, Dold, and Cogan, you've got to be one of the top people around, because those are three people who were not known for handing out praise liberally. Readers loved her, journalists admired her, and politicians feared her. Can't do much better than that. We're going to close with our feature tonight, Hal Prince, who died recently at the age of 91. Hal Prince was a legend on Broadway. He won a record 21 Tonys as a producer and director. He had at least some involvement in many of the biggest shows of the last half century. Here's The Guardian on Hal Prince. Harold Prince, a Broadway director and producer who pushed the boundaries of musical theater with such groundbreaking shows as The Phantom of the Opera, Cabaret, Company, and Sweeney Todd, and won a staggering 21 Tony Awards, has died at 91. Prince, known as Hal, was famous for his fluid cinematic director's touch and was unpredictable and uncompromising in his choice of stage material. He often picked challenging, offbeat subjects to musicalize, such as a murderous knife-wielding barber who baked his victims in pies, or the 19th century opening of Japan to the West. Along the way, he helped create some of America's most enduring musical hits, first as a producer of such shows as The Pajama Game, Damn Yankees, West Side Story, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, and Fiddler on the Roof. He later became a director overseeing such landmark musicals as Cabaret, Company, Follies, Sweeney Todd, Evita, and The Phantom of the Opera. Sir Andrew Lloyd-Webber, reached by phone on Wednesday, said it was impossible to overestimate the importance of Prince to musical theater. All of modern musical theater owes practically everything to him, he said. Lloyd-Webber recalled that as a young man he had written the music for the flop Jeeves and was feeling low. Prince wrote him a letter urging him not to be discouraged. The two men later met, and Lloyd-Webber said he was thinking of next doing a musical about Evita Peron. Prince told him to bring it to him first. That would be game-changing for me. Without that, I often wonder where I would be, Lloyd-Webber said. Prince worked with some of the best-known composers and lyricists in musical theater, including Leonard Bernstein, Jerry Bach and Sheldon Harnick, John Kander and Fred Ebb, and most notably Stephen Sondheim. "I don't do a lot of analyzing of why I do something," he once said in an interview. "It's all instinct." Only rarely, he said, did he take on an idea just for the money, and they were probably bad ideas in the first place. Theater is not about that. It is about creating something. The fact that some of my shows have done so well is sheer luck. During his more than 50-year career, Prince received a record 21 Tony Awards, including 2 special Tonys, one in 1972 when Fiddler became Broadway's then longest-running musical, and another in 1974 for a revival of Candide. He was also a recipient of a Kennedy Center honor. He earned a reputation as a detail-heavy director. Barbara Cook, whose podcast we've done and I refer you to, in her memoir Then and Now wrote, "I admire him greatly, but he also did not always make things easy for one basic reason. He wants to direct every detail of your performance, down to the way you crook your pinky finger." It was Stephen Sondheim, who was the lyricist for West Side Story, that Prince produced his most creative and enduring relationship with. Prince produced A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum in 1962, which was the first Broadway show for which Sondheim wrote both music and lyrics. Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. As a final tribute to Hal Prince, we're going to have him talk about 2 of his most famous Broadway productions. The first is sort of for Sid. It's Hal Prince talking about West Side Story, which just happens to be one of Sid's favorites.
I knew it was marvelous. And I used to stand in the back of the theater and think, you're in a very great historical moment in the theater. And you've been let in on it rather late because it's lost its original producer who was gun shy about raising money for it. I learned techniques that I had not known before. The fluidity of the show was unique. The seriousness of the subject was unique, and the strange hybrid way that you could tell a story about two gangs knife fighting in New York with Leonard Bernstein's incredibly important score and the gangs dancing properly. They were doing Jerome Robbins ballet dancing, and yet there was nothing that didn't fit together and work and make the story very exciting and real for the audience. That's a feat. It was an invitation to try to do musicals that were of that serious nature. And I did. We ran about a year and a half. Then we went to Chicago. Then we came back and ran another 8 months, I think. There were always about 200 walkouts at every performance of that show in the intermission because they just weren't ready for it. And also, parenthetically, it won an award for choreography, but it didn't win any other awards that year. All the Tonys, everything went to the Music Man, which was something they really got. And the critics got. The critics did not realize what they were looking at either, which is common. The point is, we made history, and by 1961, when the movie came out, everybody was ready for it. And it was a huge success. Again, parenthetically, my investors benefited enormously from the movie, so it's probably one of the most successful musicals I've ever done. But the movie was responsible for that.
We're going to close with another one of Hal Prince's legendary Broadway shows, Cabaret. And although he mentions how important Joel Grey was to the show, what he doesn't mention is that Joel Grey was just knocking around the fringes of Broadway theater when Hal Prince called him for the role in Cabaret, and he was actually seriously considering giving up the theater. It was this role that not only saved Joel Grey's career, but made him a huge star with one of the most iconic performances in both Broadway and in cinema history.
What good is sitting alone in your room? Come hear the music play.
Cabaret was an idea of so many people's I can't tell you. It was out there in the world. I thought they were all trivializing it. And I thought they're making a happy-go-lucky musical about an English girl who couldn't sing or dance but did both and went down the drain with her life. But wow, was it fun. A flapper. Well, that didn't interest me at all. You know, Gwen Verdon, I could see her doing it. She'd been brilliant, but why? And when the movie was made with Liza, I thought it was a terrific movie, but I thought Liza was too talented for it. I've always thought that. The girl should not be the central, huge musical theater talent. The girl is an irresponsible breath of life and a good character, but the show is about the rise of the National Socialist Party in Germany and the rise of Nazism. And we made it, and we made a hit out of it, a big hit out of it. So I'm very proud of it. It was controversial in that some people walked out once in a while, but mostly the audience got it. And one of the reasons they got it was that Joel Grey was so seductive in the part and charismatic and interesting. They thought he was cute. I had a woman ask me, why don't you sell dolls of the MC in the lobby? And I said, with or without swastika? And she just hadn't even gone there.
Welcome in cabaret, au cabaret du cabaret.